Life doesn't often give you a warning when it's about to change forever. For me, that moment came on an ordinary day in 2020, but it was already a time of deep personal loss. Just a week earlier, my grandfather had passed away suddenly, under unusual circumstances. The grief was still fresh when I found myself hurtling down the road toward a collision that would turn my entire world upside down. The sound of metal, twisting, shattering glass, and my heart racing echoed in the chaos that followed the impact. I had been hit by an impaired driver, and the force of the crash felt like nothing I'd ever experienced before. It was as if time slowed down just long enough for me to process the fact that this wasn't just an accident. This was something bigger. But at that moment, my thoughts weren't about the pain or the destruction surrounding me. All I could think about was my grandfather. I had promised to be the pallbearer at his funeral the next day, and no amount of pain or injury was going to stop me from keeping that promise. When the paramedics arrived, I refused medical attention. I knew if I went to the hospital, I'd be kept overnight, and I couldn't bear the thought of not being there to carry my grandfather one last time. So I walked away from the wreck, battered and bruised, determined to honor him. I didn't know then that my brainstem had been knocked into my spinal cord, creating a 7-centimeter syrinx. I didn't know that the collision would reveal a condition I had unknowingly lived with, Chiari malformation, or that I'd be passing 13 kidney stones as part of my journey to healing. What I did know, as I carried my grandfather to his final resting place the next day, was that this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something new. It took me weeks to fully grasp the enormity of what had happened. My body was in constant pain, and the medical world had its priorities upside down, thanks to COVID. Surgeries to deal with the kidney stones were deemed non-essential, leaving me to pass them one by one, each one worse than the last. It wasn't until I became septic that they decided to intervene. Talk about adding insult to injury, having to beg for the surgery I needed just so they could fix my spine. If I weren't living it, I'd laugh at the absurdity. But here's the thing. Through all the pain, the frustration, and the uncertainty, I knew, deep down, that this was happening for a reason. As impossible as it seemed, I kept telling myself, and anyone who'd listen, that this accident, this seemingly cruel twist to fate, was a blessing. I didn't know how at the time, but I believed it. I knew that someday I'd look back on all of this and recognize the gift buried in the rubble of that crash. I didn't get there immediately, of course. The days stretched long between doctor's appointments, surgeries being delayed, and my own brain playing tricks on me. Every day, people around me had that same sad look on their faces, like they were sorry for me. Like my existence had somehow been reduced to this horrible thing that had happened. But I wasn't sorry for myself, not for a second. I'd tell them that this was one of the greatest blessings of my life, even if I had no idea how, yet. That's what made it a blessing, that I couldn't see it at the time. I knew that this was the universe's final test for me. Everything I had gone through, my life, my work, my family, was building up to this moment. This was my great reset. The accident was a gift, disguised in the ugliest wrapping paper possible. It was the universe's way of saying, how will you react to this? What will you do with this new life I've handed you? And it's funny, looking back now, at how clear it all seems. That accident was the catalyst for everything that followed. It forced me to slow down, to reconnect with my family in ways I hadn't before, and to find gratitude in every moment, even the painful ones. It allowed me to reset my priorities and realign with what truly mattered. This is the story of that transformation, of how the impossible became a blessing, of how I chose gratitude over bitterness, love over fear, and presence over the rush of success. And most importantly, it's a story of how I learned that heaven on earth isn't something you wait for. It's something you choose to create.